What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. So this is a re-upload of a video that I'm really proud of. I basically talk about how the end of Warhammer 40k could come about and bring about Warhammer 50k. So I go through each faction and talk about how their end times plays out. However, with the reintroduction of the Voltan, I wanted to ask you guys how the Voltan could play a part within this Death of 40k storyline. So let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Enjoy.
Humanity has always been beset by countless enemies. The treacherous heretic, the vile Xenos, and the ungodly demon. The Imperium has held up for thousands of years, but that's all going to change, for an inevitable secret has been uncovered: the failure of the Golden Throne. The death of the Emperor will soon arrive, and with it, so too will the Astronomicon fall. These pillars of hope will send humanity to the depths of despair. As the Emperor draws his last breath, Magnus the Red senses that the time for chaos to rise will soon be at hand, and the gods have set their sights on Holy Terra. With the death of the Emperor, the Adeptus Custodes were recalled back to Terra to defend the tomb where the Emperor lies, under the Imperial Palace, from the many warp gates that have spawned after his death. As they protect the corpse of the Emperor, the Terran Genestealer cults have begun launching multiple hit-and-run assaults all across the world. But all that pales in comparison to the new looming threat coming their way: the many tendrils of the hive mind. The Imperial Guard has been stretched far too wide and thin. Casualties are at an all-time high, and morale is at an all-time low. Entire regiments have begun to desert their posts. The Guard have a saying: victory is measured in blood, yours and the enemy's. But now it seems that the Astra Militarum has no more blood left to give. With their Emperor-given miracles taken from them, the Sisters of Battle have begun to question their faith. Many orders have renounced their devotion to their god, and have turned their prayers towards the ruinous powers of chaos. The few who still believe began a crusade back towards Terra. All the while, Saint Celestine is nowhere to be found. News of the Emperor's death spread like wildfire, and the High Lords began to take action. Many fortified their positions to keep their power by allying with Xenos, while others found it easier to become a pawn of chaos. Luckily, the many eyes and ears of the Inquisition took notice. Various assassins were dispatched to quell rebellions or would-be heretics. But one High Lord managed to rally a sector of space, all for his own, via the might of the Minotaur chapter. The Adeptus Ministorum held strong during their darkest times, but many priests heard the voice of their god Emperor after his death. Whether this really was the Emperor or some other force remains to be a mystery, but the Imperial Creed held on. Shrine worlds became beacons of hope for untold trillions of people, many of them being former guardsmen. Entire worlds would embark on pilgrimages in hopes of salvation, but most never reached their destination. Upon the death of the Emperor, the Sisters of Silence were ordered to be stationed on various locations on Terra to create a matrix of anti-warp energy. At any given time, 6 untouchables were to stand vigil, protecting the tomb of the Emperor. The final guardians of mankind, the Space Marines, the saviors of last resort. Most kept to their Emperor-given vow, the defense of humanity. Their time was occupied either fighting against the creeping Tyranid threat, the newly spawned Black Orcs from the Octaria sector, or the Silent Kings United Necron Alliance. Under the leadership of Roboute Guilliman and Lionel Johnson, who had awoke after Dante of the Blood Angels slew Abaddon the Despoiler, after succumbing to the Black Rage. With 2 Primarchs leading the last hope of humanity, the Imperium held for 665 days after the death of the Emperor. But on the 666th, the Space Marines knew fear. The largest collective chaos force ever seen spilled out from the Cicatrix Maledictum. Countless demons of the 4 Chaos Gods marched in tandem, ignoring their grudges, for one goal: the retrieval of the Emperor's corpse, for his body would be used as a conduit to hold the soul of the recently deceased Abaddon the Despoiler, and through him, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch could possess and enter real space. To make this goal attainable, the apocalyptic army of chaos was led by none other than the demon Primarchs: Magnus, Fulgrim, Perturabo, Angron, Mortarion, and Lorgar. The psychic backlash from the Immaterium's demonic horde alerted the ancient Eldari that now was the time to strike at their most hated enemy, she who thirsts. The Inari, the Drukhari, the Exodites, and the Harlequins amassed all they had to wage war. Wraith constructs were awoken, their avatars summoned, and the 5 crone swords of legend were given to their best warriors. Abandoning all fear, they entered the warp. For what did they have to fear when they had already successfully freed their goddess of rebirth, Isha, from Nurgle's grasp? The ethereal caste had a premonition that the hierarchy of the galactic powers was about to change. They then gave the order to all Sept worlds to halt all sphere expansion efforts and to divert all attention towards the production of artificial intelligent drones and battlesuit systems. Heavy shield drones were mass-produced in the billions in order to shield their planets through an upper atmosphere network array. Pure-tide neural engram chips were integrated with advanced AI-piloted battlesuits as another means of defense. And then came the order of having 90% of the Tau population undergo stasis sleep. The Tau would simply not participate in these end times. They were to awaken to a new galaxy. Such was the decree of the Ethereals. A foolish decision, for in their hibernation, many of their auxiliaries left the greater good ideology. At first, few planets fell to the horrors of the void, until the Black Orcs figured out how to use their teleporters to bypass the defense grid. The renegade Oshova had long since cut ties to the Tau Empire, but upon receiving multiple distress beacons from Sept worlds, he could no longer ignore his people. The Enclaves had been expert orc hunters, but these new Black Orcs were bigger, stronger, and much more durable than what they were used to fighting. Countless lives were lost, for the killing blow way of warfare that Farsight taught couldn't account for the destructive fury of these orcs. The war was lost, and the Black Tide swept across all of Tau-controlled space. Commander Farsight was the lone Tau survivor, the last of his race, all thanks to his relic, the Dawnblade. The immortal body of this hot-blooded warrior would forever battle against these Black Orcs, a ghost attempting to avenge a dead race. A heroic yet hopeless act. The death of the Emperor also meant that the Omnissiah was gone. The belief in the machine spirit drove the legions of Skitarii towards the stars to continue their search for an STC that could revive the machine god. Many Forge worlds were left empty as the Admech became a spacefaring faction. But Belisarius Cawl took a different approach. He integrated himself directly into the Martian Forge, becoming one with the planet. The unified Chaos Army cut a swath through any and everything in their way towards Terra. Entire worlds were swallowed by their ruinous maws, armadas torn to shreds, and in their wake, more joined their ranks by pledging themselves to the Chaos Gods. Chaos was only one step away from reaching the Imperial Palace, but they had to get through the sentient planet of Mars first. Guilliman and his forces ready to back up call, but a Vox was sent out to tell them to stay back. Mars then began to quake, and the blood-red sands split open. From deep within the world's core, a massive arm burst forth. A roar heard across the galaxy signaled the birth of an uncharted Catan. The Void Dragon arises. As the ancient star god battles the demonic horde, more and more battle barges arrive, both traitor and loyalist. The war across Mars quickly becomes too destructive, as many Titan-class war machines go apocalyptic. Guilliman notices that both the Forge and the Void Dragon are struggling, and he orders for all Imperial forces to push forward. Were it not that chaos is the weakness of the Catan, then perhaps they could have repelled the demonic horde. But the Void Dragon met his end at the hands of a demon Primarch. Lorgar, which was being buffed by Magnus's magic, beheaded the Catan with the use of Dracnian. The explosive backlash of a god's death sent a chain reaction of blasts all across Mars, and the planet could hold on no longer. Any Psykers still able to attempted to shield their forces from the planet-sized explosion that came, but it was for naught. Both armies suffered an excruciatingly high amount of casualties. Even more so perished in the ensuing black hole created in Mars's wake. Until finally, a heavily damaged Magnus managed to expel the black hole. Unfortunately for Chaos, Lorgar and Perturabo perished in the blast, but their demonically enhanced bodies meant that they'll emerge from the bowels of the warp once again. By the Emperor's grace, both Lionel Johnson and Roboute Guilliman survived. The Order was then sent out to regroup on Terra and prepare for what could be their last battle. But before they could assemble, Constantine Valdor voxed in, stating that the traitorous Primarchs had teleported before the gates of the Imperial Palace. The Custodes and Sisters of Silence were already in combat against them. By the time the Lion and Guilliman teleported to join in on the battle, most of the Custodes and Sisters were already dead. Only Mortarion seemed to have been wounded. Lionel Johnson unsheathed the Lion Sword, and Guilliman ignited the Emperor's blade. For the Emperor! At this point in time, the Supreme Grand Master of the 666th Space Marine chapter telepathically spoke to Valdor. With no other option left, the two agreed it was time, and the Terminus Decree was enacted. With a single coordinated motion, everything changed. The galaxy erupted in golden light as the warp birthed forth a divine god of chaos, the fifth chaos god, the Star Father. The Emperor of Mankind had been reborn through apotheosis at the great cost of human life. Untold billions of trillions of humans had their souls ripped from their bodies and into the God Emperor's army of the light. Entire sectors of space lost all of their human population. The Imperium had lost most of its inhabitants, but hope was restored. For a new faction was created to illuminate the shadows of chaos and bring order to the warp. The Star Father and his reborn warriors of light had arrived. Standing between the demon Primarchs and the Loyalists were three warriors: Saint Celestine, Ferrus Manus, and Sanguinius. The Emperor's angels had arrived. Angron and Fulgrim charged forward, but were pinned down by a hail of burning bolter rounds. All around them, the Legion of the Damned materialized. Zeech ordered Magnus to retreat, for this was a major unknown in the Changer of Ways' plans. Reluctantly, the spell was cast by Magnus. and in their retreat, a new age was ushered in.